What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another members-only edition of the Everyday Sens podcast. I am Jack Richardson, joined by Brennan Parks. Brennan, this is another fun one, right? We've done the hot takes section before. I'm 90% sure we have. So we're gonna do that again. I haven't read these at all. Members of everydaysens.com have submitted hot takes to be read on our show here, and basically, this is a good way for us to promote the everydaysens.com website. We obviously have been pushing the YouTube subscriptions, but if you subscribe to everydaysens.com, every now and then we will post a close friends only Instagram story, which you will be a part of once you subscribe. And you get options like this to throw in some hot takes. We are also, I'm going to tease this now, we're going to start trying to do a little, members kind of guest thing. We're going to try and get that sorted out as pretty soon leading into the season as well. So, a chance to come on and just be interviewed essentially by us, and we'll just ask you kind of what brought you as a Sens fan and all that. So it's a lot of perks, and this is one of them as a member of everydaysens.com. So without further ado, Brennan, let's get into some hot takes here about the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah, for sure. And on top of that as well, I did put out a thing asking if people would be interested in coming on, and yeah, a ton of people were. So we will get on to that. Like I said, I'm moving, and then once I'm more settled, we can kind of jump into that, because right now there's just a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes. So once I'm settled, we'll get into all that and we'll have people on. But yeah, the season's not too far either. We got another month till training camp. But yeah, we'll get into the hot takes here. So we're going to start off with some goaltenders, because this has been kind of a little hot topic. There's a couple on them. So we're going to start off with this one from @AlexLawlerSucks. And again, Alex is always submitting them. I've got two from him again today. So it's Anton Forsberg plays 40 plus games. And I like this one because obviously Ottawa signed Joonas Korpisalo to a 5-year $20 million contract, and people were kind of up in arms about the massive deal that they kind of seemingly overpaid a little bit just to kind of get their guy, make sure they got him, because their options were limited. Otherwise, you saw Pittsburgh, they had to go back to Tristan Jarry, and that was kind of questionable. So I like this one from Alex. I mean, I want to get your take for sure, but I think Korpisalo is the 1A level goaltender in everyone's mind right now. I don't think there's anyone saying Forsberg's going to start over him. They're obviously going to be a tandem, but I think especially coming off of 2 torn MCLs, this is certainly a flaming hot take from Alex. I mean, if Forsberg does this, I think the injury, obviously, if Korpisalo gets hurt, that's one way, but I prefer to look at this in a hotter lens of Forsberg just outperforms Korpisalo and earns that starting role. So what do you think about this one?
Yeah, that's an interesting take, because I mean, like, personally, when I see this right away, I think that, Korpisalo gets hurt, because ideally, yeah, you want both of them to play 41 games, just go back and forth. Like, that's ideal world, but that won't happen, right? I don't think it'll be as bad as it was last season. Like, there's no way that, and I want to be careful again, because it's just clip material here for later in the year, but there's no way the Sens use 7 goalies again, right? Like, that was almost, it wasn't a record, but it was unprecedented, the amount of goalies they used in the NHL and in Belleville. Like, Belleville suffered from it too. So organizationally, I think we can expect better health for the goalies. That being said, though, I mean, I kind of can see this happening. I think you're right. I think Forsberg himself is going to be the guy who, is able to take the reins. Here's an interesting thing. Like, would it be more common, or not more common, but do you think it's more likely that Forsberg takes the reins than Korpisalo, or what's the, because I mean, kind of in back-to-back seasons here, Forsberg has taken the reins from the guy who was kind of pegged as the better goalie than him, right? I mean, Matt Murray was the starting goaltender, and then Cam Talbot, it was supposed to be a tandem, but I think pedigree-wise, Cam Talbot was probably a better goalie, but overall, Forsberg had a better year than him. Again, so that's back-to-back years. Do you think that happens again with Korpisalo? And I feel like you mentioned, that's him taking the reins. That's him playing 40 plus games.
Yeah, for sure. And I've mentioned it many times now. I think last year, and I didn't even realize this until I just looked, but Forsberg last year, so I considered him the second best goalie outside of the playoffs. That was Sorokin in New York. But last year he played 46 games, and I mean 2021-22, not this past year. He had a 917 save percentage in 46 games, and I don't even think I ever saw that number, or I didn't remember it. That is extremely good. Like, he was like top tier, not top tier, but high tier level goaltender that year as a starter for Ottawa. So again, if he can come back to be even, a 910 or higher save percentage, like, he could very well take it, because we talked about it. Korpisalo, great season this past season, but before that, he kind of struggled a little bit in Columbus. If he regresses to the point where he's below 9.0 or 9.10 save percentage, and Forsberg's outperforming him. Like DJ Smith and the Sens as a whole have been very, very high on the fact that they want to play the hot hand. Like they want to start the goalie who's hot. I think they even said it a lot when Murray was here too, because Murray was kind of the obvious starter. But they said, like, we're gonna play whoever's gonna win us games. Like it doesn't matter in this, on paper who's the 1A, who's the 1B. If Korpisalo's in a slump and he's struggling, I think Forsberg could very well swoop in and take his job. Like you said, he's done that before, right? A couple of times now. So I know we both really like Anton Forsberg. I'm big on him as a person too. Like he had the interviews he does, and you see him. He was at the wedding this summer too, at Brady's wedding, I think, and he just, I don't know, he's a very easy guy to root for. But I think regardless, like as hot of a take as this is, either way, I think Ottawa's got a great tandem here. That's the kind of basis of this whole summer, is that signing Korpisalo gives you the flexibility. If Forsberg takes a starting job, go for it. Like that'd be awesome to see, right? Because you want one of these guys needs to step up, is basically the case. Or they both need to be averaged together, but one of them cannot be a liability. That's kind of my goal. So do you have anything else on Forsberg? Because our next one actually relates into this. So we can continue talking about it a little bit here. It's going to be from at Josh Lair 95. It's Korpisalo and Forsberg finished with the same save percentage of .906. So I wanted to talk about this one because I want to see if you think this would be good enough. Because we just said, like, Forsberg in 2021-22 had a 917 save percentage. Korpisalo this past year had a 915 save percentage. If they can get one of their guys posting those numbers, they're going to be in a great spot. But is 906 average enough if they both do it to have this team? Like, to me, 906 basically means that the team has to be very good in front of them. Like they have, like the goalies are not going to carry them at that number, but they'll be good enough, right? Like, do you think that's good enough, or is that a little too bad for your liking?
So here's the I'm going to spin this a little bit. If they both have a 906, I don't think that's good enough. If that's the average between the two, I think that can be good enough, because quick math here, like someone has a 910, someone has a 901, whatever it is, then the average is a 906. I think that would be enough. Like you said, though, one guy has to be hovering at least around 910. I think that's fair to expect. Excuse me. But if they both have 906, that's not good enough. I don't think at all. Forsberg last year, I think, had you said, a 901 or 902. Like, and Talbot was in around the same area. Like, that just won't get it done enough. Now, the thing is, if I'm going on the basis of the Sens and how much shots they give up, and that could change. DJ has said he's going to change the way he coaches this team. The blue line's better. They're going to have the puck way more than they used to. So all those factors could impact how many shots they end up giving up on a nightly basis. I think that's important too, because look, a 912 save percentage could be the same as a 906, depending how many shots your team gives up, in terms of goals against. So again, that comes now into goals against average. That becomes important as well. But yeah, I think with what we know with the Sens and what we have on paper, I think it's fair to expect that they're still going to give up a lot of shots. It could be a lot of high flying, end-to-end games like it was last year and actually the last 2 years. Very exciting hockey. But in that sense, if you have an exciting team that's going to give up and also create a lot of chances, you need a goalie who's going to make the saves they're supposed to. And like you mentioned, Forsberg had a fantastic year in 2022. He had a 917 save percentage. If you can find a happy medium around 910, 911, 912, that's ideal. And I think that's what they need out of him. So no, I don't think this would be good enough. And I hope that this hot take doesn't come true.
For sure, yeah. And I just looked it up, and surprisingly, goalies this past year actually averaged a 904 save percentage as a whole in the whole NHL. But again, like if you look at your starters on your good teams, they typically are above that number, and it's pretty rare to see contending teams who have a goalie who's like 890 or something. It's usually at least semi above average for contending teams. So I agree with you, though. I think Ottawa still isn't going to be this elite defensive team necessarily. I think a lot of that also banks on health, because if a couple guys go down, you're in a rough spot. But this kind of leads back to, they need everybody to buy in. Like, they need the forwards to buy in, because the team should be good enough that the goalies should finish with a save percentage of above this 906 number we're seeing. I think that they should be good enough defensively to prevent the goalies from that, unless the goalies really fall off a cliff and are bad. But it all comes back to the forwards buying in and being able to help it defensively. You can't have Batherson out there not back checking. You can't even Brady said they were cheating a lot this past year. So yeah, it comes back to that, and I think that, like I've said, I don't think the goalies need to carry the team, but at the same time, I think having a 906 save percentage for both of them kind of means that they both underperformed. I think we would consider that I agree with you. Like, it shouldn't happen. We don't want that to happen. So we can move off the goalies. We talked quite a bit about them. And I think, like I said, I think that one of them at least will probably outperform that number of 906 and be up around 910, like you said. So we'll move on to this one, kind of relates because Forsberg was hurt. We'll say from at Not Vitez, if key players play 70 games for Ottawa or more, Ottawa wins the Atlantic Division. Now, that is a pretty hot take as well, because winning the Atlantic, let alone making the playoffs, right, is kind of our goal. But I think this kind of means, like, if they don't suffer any long-term injuries. So this past year, we had Norris, we had Pinto the year before. Like, I would kind of consider this, as long as nobody gets hurt long-term this year, Ottawa wins the Atlantic. And I mean, wins the Atlantic for me is maybe a little too hot. Like, I don't know if they'd be able to win the Atlantic with the competition that we have there, but I do think that, like, saying they would finish top 3 in the Atlantic would be a take that I could get behind. What about you?
Yeah, that's tough. You know what's crazy, honestly, is the 70 games thing is what stands out to me more than the win the Atlantic. As in terms of, I don't know how realistic that is. And only I'm just saying that because let's say let's say it's 70 on the dot. If all the key players play at least 70, you've got Shabbat, Kachuk, Stutzel who play 71, 73, whatever. That probably means at some point in time you're rarely going to have a full lineup. And I think that's why it's if this number was 75, I think I'd be more inclined to say, yeah, I could see them winning the Atlantic in that case. But right now, I don't know. Like, because 70 games, like missing 12 games is not nothing. Like, that's a lot. That's a couple weeks in the season, right? And if multiple guys, let's say, miss that. So I think last year the Sens had 5 guys who played 82 games. It was Giroux, Kachuk, DeBrincat, Batherson, and I want to say another forward, maybe Kastelik. Pinto played 82. Yeah, so that's those are your guys who played all 82, and like it's rare, I think, for a team to have a lot of players. Like I think even 5 players playing all 82 is kind of rare. But I don't know. I mean, the win the Atlantic thing is probably what would say I don't think this is going to happen. But again, I'm expecting, and we're both expecting them to be top 3 in the Atlantic. I think that's the standard. So if playing like, this really is a hot take. It's stumping me a little bit. Like I don't know. Like there's 2 parts. It's like if them winning the Atlantic is, sorry, God, man, my bad. If them winning the Atlantic is, the hot take part of this, then I would disagree. But I think the 70 games, like you could argue that's, I don't know if that's a healthy season. Like, yeah, it's long term, but Josh Norris played 66 the year he got 35, and he was still injured for a good part of the year, and that's only 4 less games than 70. So when you think about it in that context, it's weird. But yeah, I don't think they're going to win the Atlantic, although I would not be surprised if they do, if that makes sense, if this injury history like holds up.
Yeah, it does make sense, and I'm with you. I think, like I said, I'd be confident making this, like, they'll finish in the top 3 in the Atlantic if they don't suffer any long-term injuries, is the way I would put it. The 70 games, we kind of mentioned it yesterday too on the pod, and you can check that one out if you missed it, but we compared Ottawa to Florida, and we said, like, Aaron Ekblad and Brandon Montour, they're going to miss the start of the season for Florida, and we said, like, although they might only miss, a couple of weeks or 10, 20 games, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but, like, that can be the difference. I mean, look at Ottawa last year down the stretch and how they were competing for the playoffs. Like, their whole season got screwed by November, right? Which is, how many games was that? Like 12 games? Like, their whole season was lost at that point. And, like, if they would have just won a couple of those games, they would have been in, you know what I mean? So missing even the first 2 weeks of the season can be detrimental depending on how your record does. Like, if Florida loses, like, if they start out the year without Ekblad and Montour and they have that god-awful defense we talked about, like, if they put up a record of, 5-10 or something without those guys, or 5-12 or something, like, that can very much derail their season. That's hard to come back from. So I think it's the same for Ottawa. Like, even if you're missing, if Norris and Batherson get hurt and they're both out for, 12 games or something at the same time, like, Ottawa's lineup looks a lot worse. You know what I mean? Like, that is a huge detriment to them. So I'm like, injuries and health are the main thing on my mind entering this season, just because obviously Pinto might not be a key player necessarily, but he was out 2 years ago for the whole year. Norris was out, then Forsberg got hurt. They had the 7 goalies. I mean, I don't understand, like, how many people are going to get hurt here for long term. Hopefully they can avoid any long term injuries this year. Chikrin makes me nervous with his injury history too a little bit. So I'm holding my breath, and hopefully we can enter opening night at least and get a few games with a whole healthy lineup. Nobody gets hurt during camp. If there's no long-term injuries, like I said, I'm very confident in the team's ability, because we also mentioned yesterday, I don't know if we talked about it on the actual pod, but a couple teams had perfect seasons, like Buffalo and New Jersey. They, like, nobody was hurt. They had guys hitting career years. Nobody was hurt, healthy the whole year, and they had, good seasons. Buffalo missed the playoffs, of course, but they had a better season than people expected in the large scheme of things. So if Ottawa can have a season not necessarily perfect, but just like 90% healthy, then I think they'll be in a great spot. So yeah, you don't have anything else on that, eh? Or actually, let me ask you one more thing. What this is going to be a little bit on the spot, but what do you think the Atlantic looks like in regards to how it stacks up next year? Like, you think Ottawa will be top 3, so who do you think's above them, and who do they pass?
I don't want to say I think they're going to be. I think that's what
We
I'm
should expect them
expecting.
to.
Yeah, and I was gonna kind of pivot this is like, if when you say key players, if key players who have injury history like Chikrin and Norris, if they play 70 plus games, I think that makes sense that they could win the division. Like, I don't think that's crazy. I want to hold off on predictions until we go through every team and kind of like do the thing we've done with Buffalo and Florida. Like, when we do that with Toronto and when we do that with Boston and Tampa and all that, then I'll have a better answer. Because quite honestly, like I've said it both times we've done it already, that it kind of like, I didn't realize that this was their depth chart, even though you have an idea of these teams that you see all the time. So I think in the mix though, like I think Toronto's going to be top 3, and I feel like I don't think anyone else is a shoe-in. And I say Tampa. Look, Tampa could go and win the division next year just because they've had rest, and they haven't had rest in a long time. They have a short off season now for the first time in a few years, and I think that'd be scary. Now, I said the age thing about Florida, but the turnaround and all that didn't really affect Tampa, but year by year, you're starting to see a little bit of drop off from them. So maybe, but again, Tampa's a team I would not be surprised if they go on a run and just are the best team in the league next season. Like, they have that talent on the roster. So I would say Tampa and Toronto are probably in the mix. But other than that, like, I think it's wide open. I really do. And saying wide open makes it sound like it's a bad division, but it's a very good division. And Ottawa's put themselves in a conversation for a playoff spot. Like, that's not just us being Sens fans. I think league wide, they are expected to push for a playoff spot next season. And that to me just means that they could be competing for top 3 in the division. So I've got 2 teams up there right now. Could change once we do the head-to-head comparisons with all the teams in the Atlantic, but that's where I have them right now. What about you?
Yeah, I think right now, looking at it, like, I only really have Toronto pegged at the top, and I hate to say that, obviously, but at the same time, like, they have the core, right, where they're in place, and that might even deform over the next couple of years, but right now, like, you look at their team, and they just have, like, unless Matthews or somebody gets hurt, I think that they're kind of the most solidified Atlantic team. I still think they're going to lose in the playoffs, but, like, they're a good regular season team. After that, like you said, Tampa and Boston, I just feel like they're going to regress. Like, I think they're going to be contenders, absolutely. I'm not saying they're going to be bad, but you look at their rosters, and we're going to go through it, but I'm not blown away, like, they're getting older, and you can't keep expecting these guys, like, their top guys, to produce like they have in their prime. So I'm hoping that they regress, because we said this about Boston last summer, and Boston came out and put up like the best record of all time. So hopefully that doesn't happen again, but I think Ottawa and Buffalo too are primed to kind of push for spots in the Atlantic. And even looking at it too, like, we're so conditioned now to feeling like Ottawa's not going to be a top 3 team in the Atlantic. I don't even think many people expect that. I think many just hope they get a wild card, because at this point it's been so long, right? You just hope that they can squeak in, and it feels unrealistic to jump from outside of the playoffs to being top 3 in the Atlantic. But, like, when Ian Mendes came on, he told us that John Cooper, when he talked to him, said there's going to be a year of chaos where certain teams regress, like Tampa and Boston, and then certain teams like shoot up, which is Ottawa and Buffalo pretty much this year. And yeah, I think that, like, Ottawa, I just don't even know how they'll miss the playoffs this year if everyone's healthy. I think if they did, there would be some sort of a drastic failure, because you got to be able to compete with Tampa and Boston this year. In my mind, I think they're not as good as they were. Boston especially lost a lot of key players. Bergeron retired. Krejci, I don't think Krejci's coming back either. They lost Taylor Hall. I mean, I don't know. That team, to me, we're gonna go through it, but they look a lot worse. And I think Ottawa should be right there with them. I know people around the league, fans still get on Ottawa saying they're gonna miss the playoffs. I saw a lot of predictions like that. It's that prove it mentality. Like, they have to prove that they can actually compete. But I think this is the year to do it. So I'm on board with you. and I think that they should be, pushing for a top 3 spot in the Atlantic, and that's not crazy to say based on the rosters that we see. So we'll move off of that. We've got one more about the playoffs, but we'll do it at the end. So we're gonna do one about a forward, and then we're gonna do 2 about defensemen, because there's some nice spicy ones about defensemen. So we'll start with this one about Vladimir Tarasenko from @Devin Santu, and that's Tarasenko scores 70 plus points and ranks among Ottawa's leaders at 5v5. So Tarasenko, of course, we talked about, he's a great 5v5 player. He's put up a ton of 5v5 points. He's scored, I believe I said, more goals than anyone on Ottawa over the last 2 years at 5v5. I think he had 38, and he's second in points behind only Tkachuk, and he's only 1 point behind Brady with like 84 5v5 points over the last 2 years. So Vladimir, he's been great at 5v5. He only had 50 points this past year, though. It was a bit of regression. I think he had 18 goals, so you can kind of take that into consideration with him jumping up to 70 plus points. Again, 2021-22, he scored a career high 82 points, I'm pretty sure. So what do you think about this one? Is he going to come up? I think first, what I'll say is if he plays with Tim Stützle, I am all aboard the 70 plus points train, but I think it is sort of dependent on who his center is.
I really do hope that they start him with the top guys, and I know that and I don't want to harp on DJ because I know you've been, not, I want to say nitpicking, but you're not happy with the way they used DeBrincat and didn't try him with Stützle at all, which I get. I understand that. I'm not as upset about that because DeBrincat, like, they tried him on the right wing and it didn't go well because he's a right-handed shot that plays the left side, and Tkachuk's your top left winger. Now what I like, though, is that Tarasenko's a left shot that plays the right side and prefers that. So if he prefers that, and again, no slight against Claude Giroux, that line was dynamite last season, one of the best in the league, and honestly, it'd be kind of crazy to touch it. But you've got this top line talent now in Vladimir Tarasenko, who on paper should be a perfect complement to play drivers like Tkachuk and Stützle, because the book on Tarasenko is that he's still got great scoring touch, but just won't be able to drive a line on his own. That's fine. I have a little bit of concern with Batherson and Norris, not in the sense that they won't be able to also drive a line and provide him with, great scoring opportunities and all that, because they will. I think that would work too. But I would be more confident in this hot take if, like you said, if he was playing with Tim Stützle. I think the fact that Stützle and Tkachuk both had great years last year at 5-on-5 would help that case, right? I think Giroux also obviously was a key part of that, but I don't know. To me, if you're concerned about maybe the lack of offense from that second line, just because Batherson did not have a good 5-on-5 season last year, and he'll probably have 2 new line mates this year when you think about it, right? And Josh Norris, a guy he's familiar with, and then either Giroux or Tarasenko. So my point is, I would be more confident in Giroux just starting on that line at least, because you've got 2 constants, I should say, and then I don't know, it might be easier to split that out. Now, they're going to play in training camp, and DJ said he's already got the lines pretty much figured out. I think Dorian said that. He went on NHL Network recently. So to me, that's what's important. I think if he plays with Stützle, then I could see this absolutely being true. I think the fact that he's 1 year removed from 82 points, and last year, yeah, he had a down year, but he was on a terrible St. Louis Blues team. Everything went wrong for the Blues last season. They weren't good on the power play, 18 goals total. I think he had 15 at even strength. That's not a bad year. It's not a great year, but it was better than, or one less than DeBrincat. It was better than Batherson, better than Pinto at 5-on-5. So all of those numbers and all of that, he goes to New York. He's not playing top power play, not playing top line minutes. I think that has to be considered when you talk about his down year last year, because it wasn't an injury concern. It was just that he was on bad teams, and he'll be on a good team this year. So I could expect 70 plus points. I think would be maybe again, I'll split this into 2 parts. I think 70 points would be more realistic than being a leader at 5-on-5. I would put it that way.
Yeah, so I have some numbers pulled up because I love numbers. So he played 69 games this past year. He scored 82 goals, or 82 goals. Wow, that would be something, eh? He scored 18 goals and 50 points. So again, he would be on pace for 60 points, something like that. But it was interesting because I was comparing him to DeBrincat a little bit. So Ottawa, Stützle led them with 56 point. Oh my God, my numbers are way off now. I'm not a numbers guy anymore. So okay, at 5v5, Ottawa's leaders. So Tim Stützle, 46 points. Brady Tkachuk, 45 points. Claude Giroux, 42 points. And then it was DeBrincat at 30. So Tarasenko actually had 31 in 69 games, right? And DeBrincat played the full 82. So that's pretty interesting that he actually had one more point in like 14 or 13 less games than DeBrincat did at 5v5, which is very notable actually. He had
And
12 goals. Yeah, go for it.
yeah, well, and I mean, like, to cut you off, but like
Yeah.
that's a bad year for Tarasenko
Yeah.
still, and he still outproduced DeBrincat, who,
Yeah.
and again, we talked a lot about how we would bank on DeBrincat bouncing back.
hmm
So why can't Tarasenko also bounce back? Like, age, whatever, but he's not falling off a cliff. He just had a bad year. Like, I like the bet that he would produce the same as DeBrincat next season. I don't think that's crazy. Like, call me nuts. Here's my hot take for the member spot. I think Vladimir Tarasenko outscores and or outproduces Alex DeBrincat next year.
If you enjoyed the first half of this podcast, you can listen to the second half with a subscription to everydaysens.com. You'll gain access to a private link in which you can watch on YouTube or listen wherever you get your podcasts. Your subscription not only grants access to additional podcasts, articles, wallpapers, and more, but it supports Everyday Sens in covering the team. Jack and I put countless hours into producing quality, unique content for fans of the Senators, and it just wouldn't be feasible without your support. So not only for the premium content, but also for the free content, we really do appreciate every single one of our subscribers. If you've been considering it, we highly recommend it, and that's where you're going to be able to watch the second half of this episode and every other members-only podcast. So thank you for listening, and go subscribe.